Good evening everyone and welcome to another Cyclone Chasers update tonight, the 14th of January 2013. A few things to get through tonight. We're talking about the end of Narelle. We're talking about this new northwest WA low. Then going to talk about the Gulf of Carpentaria, Peninsula and Coral Sea because they're the next things that will go off. Then we're going to talk about another northwest WA low, or possibly even this one making landfall as a low and then coming back and regenerating itself in about a week's time. We'll talk about the potential for that to happen. And then finally we'll look at the next 2 weeks rainfall wise, and look, there's a lot of good news out there for the far north parts that are still waiting on the monsoon. The monsoon is now encroaching onto the coast, and we are going to start seeing rainfalls ramp up. We'll have a look at exactly where we're expecting those rainfalls. Unfortunately, particularly for the eastern seaboard, not much of that making its way southwards. However, that will be dependent on where the Coral Sea or Peninsula low/cyclone actually goes in the longer term. But at this stage, most of the rainfall in at least Queensland will remain fairly well north. But we'll have a chat about that in a bit more detail soon. Alright folks, well look, Narelle's a goner. It's become a very asymmetrical system with gales mostly on its southern side now. It's really losing its structure very fast. 2 p.m. today, the Bureau had it as a Category 1. Expected to probably maintain some sort of cyclone status until sometime overnight tonight before completely weakening out into a low. Look, it may still bring a little bit of shower activity, some gusty winds, and maybe some tides and some larger waves over the southern part of WA, especially as it starts to become absorbed into a trough system and push southeast. So we might start to see some rainfall in the southwestern parts of WA. But look, in terms of its cyclone status, it's only barely maintaining it at the moment, and will completely weaken out over the next 24 hours into a low. You can see if we start looking at rainfall expectations tomorrow, most of the rainfall expected to remain offshore, so even the fact that it could be giving some rainfall is highly doubtful. Might get some falls of 5 to 10 mils in southwest WA. Look, if you're getting any rain this time of year in southwest WA, it's a bonus. So the fact that you're getting 5 to 10 mils in the southwestern parts is a real big bonus this time of year anyway, with your Mediterranean climate. At 6:30 p.m. Queensland time, we can see that basically the entire part of Narelle is just getting sheared away completely from the middle, and the system itself is lying well to the west of the convection. And we can see here these arrows here pushing the convection towards the southeast or southeast of the actual core of the system, and they're pushing it in sort of 20 to 30 knots of wind shear there. So look, the system is certainly entering now an area of increasingly unfavourable development. We're going to continue to see it being sheared away to the southeast, and then as it heads further to the south, as it makes its extratropical transition, it'll be sheared away more eastwards. So basically the actual low itself will lie well west or well to the northwest of where all the thunderstorms will lie, and that's the only real way that we might see some rain here over the southwest. So fingers crossed for them, but look, all in all, this cyclone is over. Alright folks, so let's shift our attention now to the northwest parts of WA. Now we can see quite clearly here in this satellite image, and it looks very messy, and that's what it is. It is very messy at the moment. We see this large area of convection, so hugely deep, strong thunderstorms that are just out here in the Timor Sea off the North Kimberley coastline. We also see a low pressure area, or a low pressure centre, forming, or has formed actually last night out here just to the west of the Tiwis, and has rapidly pushed towards the west-southwest. And the actual low itself, though, is not underneath this heavy cloud. The low itself is actually a little bit further to the east of that heavy cloud. And I'll show you this, and I'll show you how this looks when we take a little bit more of a dissected look at the structure of this system right now. Okay, so here's a bit more of a look using some enhanced infrared imagery, and we take a look and we can actually see that the center of this system probably lies in this area here. And the reason I say that is because we see a little bit of banding coming into the system through here. We see its heaviest thunderstorms in this region, and what we see is just a slight hint of a low there, just on the eastern edge of all that heavy convection. So that's where this low most likely lies. And through satellite wind interpretation, let's have a look at what its wind field is like at the moment. So we can see the system lies here to the north of the Kimberley coast, probably a little bit further east even from where I actually pointed out just earlier. But we see that it's very disjointed, it's very weak, there's no real circulation to it just yet. Now we do have some 20 knot southeasterly winds to the south of it, and if we head up further to the north of it, we also see some reasonable 20 to 25 knot even monsoonal winds to the north of it, but they're still a long way away from actually getting to the center of this system. So it's a long way from being a reasonable tropical low at this point in time. Now modeling suggests that the next 24 hours the system could intensify a fair bit. But overall, they've really gone cold on actually making this a tropical cyclone in the next, at least for the next 2 to 3 days. Now, don't get me wrong, we are still expecting a cyclone in the northwest over the next week to 10 days, but this low may not be it. There may be something else that pops out in a few days later. So, why have models gone cold on this particular low right now? Well, the fact is that the low being where it is in an area of moderate to high vertical wind shear. Now this is a vertical wind shear chart. This is the shear in knots. If a low develops in the blue or the black, or even if it's sort of in the greenish region, then it's got a good chance of further developing. If it's in anything else, then it's got a fairly good chance of weakening. Now you can see this low that we were tracking is just on the northern parts of the Kimberley, just off the coast here in the green and the yellow. Now, models are suggesting it's going to push in this direction here, and we see that it's pushing into a more favourable area, but that favourable area is a very, very small region. It's a very, very tight corridor that it has to run if it wants to develop into a tropical cyclone with wind shear. So, at this stage, if it pushes a little bit further to the west, it's going to get into moderate to high vertical wind shear, whereas if it pushes more southwest or south-southwest, it could be in a pretty good spot for further development, wind shear-wise at least. So it is running a bit of a tightrope there as to where it's going to go and whether the conditions will be favourable for it. This chart shows us upper level divergence. Now the reason we need upper level divergence is because what happens at the top of these systems is we need the winds once the system creates the storms, we need the tops of those storms to get blown away from the middle of those storms so we can see new storms building in their place. Now when we see positive numbers and high positive numbers on here, we tend to look at the potential for really good thunderstorm building or really good ingredients for thunderstorm building. So this is called upper level divergence, and the higher the number here, the more strength that the vacuum basically has of getting rid of or sucking out the tops of these storms to allow new storms to build. Now that tropical low is heading into a really, really favourable area of upper divergence over the next 24 hours. After that though, upper level divergence isn't as favourable. So really the next 24 to 36 hours might see this system really form a lot tighter than some of the models are showing us. This chart shows us the amount of spin in the lower levels of the atmosphere, and it's a really good chart of actually showing you where the monsoon trough is as well, because along the monsoon trough is where usually we find the greatest areas of spin. Now, what we look for when we're looking for tropical lows is an area of maximum spin in an area of pretty moderate spin otherwise. So you can see all this area here of yellowish and orangish colouring, but you can also see this tighter area of red, or darker area of orange at least, which shows us enhanced spin in the lower levels of the atmosphere. Now cyclones require that spin in the lower levels to form themselves. So as the system, once again remember the system sort of just up here, as it continues to track to a southwest direction, we're going to see it entering into areas and enhancing the area of spin to its southwest. Once again, it leads me to believe that perhaps over the next 24 hours there's a pretty good chance for this thing to further develop and strengthen, possibly bordering on a tropical cyclone intensity system in the next 24 to 36 hours, after which conditions become less favourable. Alright, well let's take a look at what the models are suggesting is going to happen with this system. Already it's being initialized probably a lot further west by the southwest by the UK Met model, and the UK Met model has it strengthening into a fairly decent tropical low, but never really making cyclone intensity over the next 2 to 3 days as it heads to the southwest and approaches the Pilbara or even Gascoyne coastline. The GFS model here has it forming in probably the right area, so it's initialized it a lot better than the UK Met, has it pushing to the west, then to the southwest, and gradually deepening into a Category 1 or 2 tropical cyclone as it drifts to the southwest, and then slows its movement down between the 17th and the 20th of January. Just in this area here of borderline sea surface temperatures to the west of Exmouth. And what it does after that, we're starting to get it too far long term. Sometimes some modelling suggesting southeast, some modelling just suggesting south and weakening. So remember, this is the same area that Narelle's just tracked in. So if it goes through that, there is going to be some upwelling of cooler water, particularly because Narelle's been quite slow moving over the past 2 to 3 days in this area of borderline water temperatures too, so we might have to take that into account in the longer term. But the GFS model is suggesting this will become a cyclone, but not in the next 24 to 48 hours, sometime later on. The no-gaps model has it pretty well initialized in the same area, so that's about as good as you're ever going to get with no gaps, and then pushes it out to the west, develops it into a tropical cyclone on the 19th or 20th, and has it just lingering well to the west of the Kimberley coastline. The Bureau of Meteorology's regional access model has this weak low pressure area in pretty well the right spot today at 10 a.m. this morning Queensland time. This graphic is courtesy of Weather Zone, who make it much easier to read than the Bureau of Meteorology site, but it is the same model that the Bureau owns. Now, interestingly, the Bureau of Meteorology's model does have it tightening up into quite a significant tropical low within the next 24 hours. As I mentioned, it's probably picking up on the fact that it's under some very good conditions over the next 24 hours. So it has it strengthening into about 1,002 hectopascal system just here to the west of the Kimberley coastline as it encounters those really favourable, remember that upper level divergence, the low wind shear, and all of that seems to come together at the right time. So bordering on a TC, maybe a very, very intense low come tomorrow. As I mentioned, in the longer term, in the 2-day time frame, it heads into an area of less than favourable conditions, with wind shear increasing, a little bit of dry air as well, and so we see that low never really strengthens into a decent tropical cyclone. It actually weakens out as it heads southwest. Most of the rain remaining offshore too, so it's back down to about 1,004, 1,002 hectopascals. And by day 3, the low sort of sits right off the Gascoyne or Pilbara coastline as a very weak feature, not really notable. What we do start to see, though, is a trending in the Gulf of Carpentaria, Western Peninsula, of an enhancement of thunderstorm activity and rainfall activity as the monsoon smashes into this region, starting about Thursday and then heading into the next few days after that. So big rainfalls here as this monsoon smacks into this region and creates a low pressure system or a low pressure area. Let's talk about that very shortly. Let's have one look at the Euro though before we do that. Okay, so the Euro this morning has initialised the low pressure area just to the north of the Kimberley coastline, so it's initialised it perfectly. Let's have a look. The Euro also picks up on this very, very intense strengthening phase over the next 24 hours. And there it is, over the next 24 hours, the system rapidly pushes to the west-southwest. But you can see here it's almost developing at least strong wind warning type winds on its southern, particularly on its southern side. So, it's going to be a fairly strong and intense tropical low over the next 24 hours. So it's going to enhance itself, it's going to really develop over the next 24. But after that, there's just a whole bunch of conditions are not going to be right for it to continue developing, and that's what the models are suggesting altogether at this point in time, except for maybe the GFS, which continues to push it out here and further develop it over the medium term. Most of the other modelling is suggesting that this is about as intense as it's going to get, which is a fairly strong tropical low, bordering on a very, very weak TC. But it's all going to happen very quickly over the next 24 to 36 hours before it starts to die off. And this is what I mean. By day 3, we just see a very, very broad area of low pressure just sitting off the Pilbara coastline, and so there's really no wind field attached to it. It's just a very weak and washed out low pressure system. So this is what I'm talking about, where the next 24 to 36 hours the system rapidly develops, and then after that the just conditions don't seem very favourable for it from most of the modelling. Alright, we're going to leave our WA friend there, but suffice to say we'll be keeping a very close eye on him, especially over the next 24-36 hours, because there could be a slight chance he might be named. If he doesn't get named, then we start looking in the longer term about a new low or that pushes sort of off the either the Kimberley or the Pilbara coastline, and that one will have better conditions for development. There is a line of thinking that could suggest that this low makes landfall and then pushes back off the coast. When it does that, it'll have a better chance of landfall. So, better chance of development. So, suffice to say, we'll be watching this one like a hawk over the next 24 hours. But after that, our attention shifts very, very much to this region here. So, for you Queenslanders, this is a time to watch. Okay, folks. Well, we're going to pick up the Euro on day 6, which is this coming Sunday. And on this coming Sunday, we see right where my cursor is an enhanced area of lower pressure shown by some of the Euro members. And if we track that area of lower pressure over the next couple of days after Sunday to see where that's moving to, we see that by Monday we have an enhanced area of low pressure here of 1,004 hectopascals, possibly lower than that. We also see some of the members developing lower pressure here in the northern Coral Sea, which what that tells us there, using an ensemble, is that some of the models of the Euro are suggesting this low will form and stay in the Gulf. Others are pushing it quickly across the Cape and into the northern Coral Sea. And so we've got two lines of thought there, just like the GFS model. The GFS model's just as confused. But we see fairly clear agreement between the Euro members that there's going to be a low. Where the low is, whether it's in the Gulf or whether it's in the Coral Sea or whether it's in the Gulf and pushes east into the Coral Sea, the model's not very clear on. What it is very clear on is that there will be a low. It will be either here, or developing here and pushing into here. Okay, so hope that hasn't confused you too much. There's probably going to be one low, and it's probably going to form here and then push eastwards, is what the model's thinking at the moment. But see, some of the members push it eastwards and some of it just keep it in here, in the Gulf. So it makes it quite difficult when we're starting to look this far ahead to see exactly what's going on. So then when we start to talk next Tuesday, we're starting to look here at a general area of low pressure, possibly a tropical cyclone in here. But also, because the model's a little bit confused, it also has an area of enhanced low pressure out here in the northern Coral Sea too. So we do need to take this and understand that there's a lot of model divergence at this early stage as to what the low will do. Whether it sticks here, if it stays in here in the Gulf of Carpentaria, this whole area of far north Queensland, the peninsula and the Gulf country is just going to get smashed with rain, unrelenting rain over the 3 to 5 day period while it sits there. If it does what some of the models are suggesting and pushes offshore into the northern Coral Sea, perhaps it'll have a little bit better chance at developing into a tropical cyclone out here, but it will also take a lot of the rain that would be falling on the coastlines away, especially if it heads out into this area. Most of the rainfall will be pushed offshore. So in terms of a wet season start, probably not the ideal situation to have it developing out here. Probably this is a much better scenario for far north Queensland at least. Look, we're not talking anywhere south of about Cairns at this stage based on that model projection, but anywhere north of Cairns, looking like a fairly wet period. Also, note here, by next Tuesday, the ensemble has pushed a new area of low pressure, 1,000 or less hectopascals, off the coast of either the Kimberley or the Pilbara, a long way away, but we can see that enhanced area of low pressure in here. The model's just not sure exactly where of this section it is, but we see a whole new low pressure area pushing off the coast next Tuesday. So a long way away, but as I say, we use ensembles because they're more likely to be right. Taking a quick stab at the longer term forecast in Wednesday's forecast, we're looking at enhanced area of low pressure. Look, if this low is still sitting here, it's probably a tropical cyclone by now, and that's what the models are showing. That if the ones that have got it in the Gulf are showing it already as becoming a cyclone, there's a fairly good chance there that if the low is just going to sit here for that long, it's going to find a day or two where it can develop itself into a TC. There's other low here in northwest WA, this new one, possibly also becoming a TC in the 8 to 10 day period as well. And we also see the potential there. Some of the models continue to like or favour the Northern Coral Sea solution. So, very interesting period here for not just northwest WA, especially the next 24 hours for the current low. This new low in a week's time. And this low here in the Gulf or the Coral Sea in a week's time too. Very interesting developments anyway for both the east and west coasts of Australia. If we take a look at the global forecasting system ensemble, this comes from America, and we see that the GFS ensemble is a little bit more keen on the Coral Sea to form into a tropical cyclone or a very intense tropical low rather than the Gulf of Carpentaria. It's finding that the better conditions are going to be out here in the northern Coral Sea, and so it tries to form a cyclone here in the 6 to 7 day time frame. In saying that, though, the GFS is still keen on keeping a very intense monsoon trough out here in the southern Gulf, possibly even a low pressure system there. And by the day 7, day 8 period, it gets very confused as to what it wants to do. It wants to keep a tropical low, very intense tropical low or weak cyclone in the southeast Gulf. It wants to form a weak cyclone in the northern Coral Sea and push it to the south and then west and hit the coast eventually. So it's very confused as to what it wants to do with this developing tropical low. Look, the point here is that the monsoon trough is going to be very strong, and all the models are showing that. The monsoon trough is going to be very, very strong on days 4 to about day 8 to 10. Somewhere in there, we're going to see lows forming along that trough line, and what it's showing us is that we're just not sure, and the models just aren't picking up the exact point of genesis of the tropical low or cyclones. Obviously in a very, very strong monsoon trough with very strong northwest winds, some decent southeast winds, there's going to be a lot of that, what we talked about at the start of the video, a lot of that spin. That spin's going to enhance the potential for these thunderstorms to start rotating and for cyclones to form. So, look, we are looking at multiple areas here over the next 7 to 10 days with multiple chances of tropical cyclone development. First in the northwest over the next 24-36 hours, low to moderate chance, and then sort of weakening out, but then redeveloping in the longer term. You can see here on day 8 we've got a tropical cyclone on the Pilbara coast. So then we're sort of looking at the Gulf of Carpentaria, possibly pushing into the northern Coral Sea, and yeah, just so many areas that we could be looking at. So we won't speculate this far ahead, but suffice to say we're really watching the next 24 to 48 hours, this little low that's just forming off the North Kimberley that may just have enough of a spin to it and may just develop itself enough to be a borderline TC or at least a very strong low over the next 24 to 48 hours before weakening. Okay, so one last look now at where the rain's going to fall in the next 2 weeks. So remember last night we showed you massive areas of 200 plus millimetres of rain falling. These numbers out here are in inches, so anything orange or more is 50 mils or more over the next 2 weeks, and we can see most of the Queensland coastline is now expecting 50 mils or more in the next 2 weeks. So this is the 15-day rainfall projection. And as we head further to the west, we're seeing a lot of rain in the top end. Look, the top end is just going to get smashed with this next monsoon surge. 200 plus millimetres, almost, yeah, just all through the coastline. I won't say guaranteed. You can never guarantee anything with the weather. But look, massive amounts of rain over the top end, and even inland in the top end as well. So good rainfalls there. 150 to 200 mils anywhere over the peninsula. Even Cairns getting up to about 100 mils over the next couple of weeks. Look, a lot of that's dependent on what this Gulf of Carpentaria low does. If it just sits there for 5 days, you're going to see these rainfall totals just massively increase in this entire region, anywhere north of Cairns. But assuming the low then pushes off, becomes a cyclone out here in the Coral Sea, we won't see those really enhanced rainfalls. The cyclone will keep all the rain offshore. As we head back towards the northwest, look, massive rainfalls expected in this region, 200 millimeters plus, even and getting onto the coastline, even on the Pilbara. So very, very bullish. The modelling is on giving this entire area a big drink, because these tropical lows just form one after another. We're watching this one now. We're going to watch another one in a week's time, and it's just all happening in the northwest, and we're just seeing massive amounts of rain. As I said the last couple of days, anywhere sort of to the east of Karratha, you're looking at big rainfalls. So look, very positive news for pretty well anyone in the tropics, but particularly so for the northwest, northern, and far northern tropics on both the eastern and western and the far northern coastlines. So excellent stuff happening. Very, very active period of weather coming up. Thanks for watching tonight, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow night.